Texas is in play. ActiVote polling concluding yesterday, Trump 53.3, Harris 46.7. So Trump is only ahead by 6 6/10 in Texas. And the margin of error is 5 points. Their last poll was on July 19th. It was Trump by 9 points. So she cut the lead by nearly 1/3 in 3 weeks. She is ostensibly within the margin of error. Texas is in play. Texas. Oh, and Florida is in play, even more in play. Polling led by USA Today, Trump 47, Harris 42. So Trump is ahead by 5 in Florida. Margin of error is 4.5 points, so Kamala Harris is within the margin of error in Florida. All previous polls, from one by the University of North Florida Research Lab to one by a Trump pollster, McLaughlin, had Trump by 8 as recently as last Thursday. Quote, "I was surprised," unquote, said David Paleologos, director of Suffolk University Research, which did the poll, the 5-point poll, that Harris is within striking distance, being only 5 points down. Florida is in play. Florida and Texas are in play. I have an urgent request of Donald Trump's campaign for president. Please continue to do everything exactly the way you are doing it now. Thank you. You are Kamala Harris's primary asset. You are her rock. Now, look, is she going to win Florida or Texas or both? I don't think so. Registered Republicans outnumber registered Democrats in Florida by 1 million. Trump won Texas in 2016 by 9 points, by 5.5 in 2020. But the fact of Kamala Harris before the convention, before the campaign has really even begun, the fact that she, by just being there, has cut Trump's lead by nearly 1/3 in Texas and nearly 40% in Florida tells you just how bad things were there and elsewhere, and just how much better things are now, and how much better they've already gotten in Florida and Texas and Michigan and Pennsylvania and America. I have previously discussed and expressed my distrust of polls, my horror at the ease of their manipulation, of my own experience with people at MSNBC asking Frank Luntz for a focus group, and for the outcome of that focus group about me before they did the focus group. I've expressed this occasionally, once or twice a week. But polls are compass needles. They don't tell you how far you have to go, and they don't give you directions on how to get there. But generally speaking, they do get the big picture right. They do get north versus south correctly. And right now, they are all saying the same thing. It is Trump who is going south. We even have the first polling on Tim Walz. Morning Consult polled on him right after she chose him, August 2 and 3, and again over this past weekend. So the original poll showed that 57% of all voters had never heard of him. Never heard of him. 57%, it is now 15%. That would be a good rollout. Walz had a favorable score of 18 in the first poll. It is now 38. His unfavorables went from 11 to 33. Cutting to the chase, he is above water by 5 points as of Sunday. As Morning Consult notes, the vice presidential pick rarely gets any traction, is rarely a boon or a bust, and this guy is in positive territory, and that's after the Republicans began to try to swift boat him. They note that Walz is at +5, and at the same point in his rollout, Vance was at -1, and I'm going to go way out on a limb here and say that JV has not exactly rebounded from -1. Couple of other results. Big Village pollsters. This is a national poll. Harris by 3. Its previous poll, Trump by 2. Nate Silver's average keeps growing. couple of parts of a point each day. Now Harris by 3 1/10 nationally. Bullfinch asked swing state voters, which candidate would you feel comfortable babysitting your kids? Total shock here on the answer. Harris 45%, Trump 20%, and I'm presuming the remaining percent, the 35% left over, those are J.D. Vance's childless cat ladies, right? Now to the election interference by Politico, by the New York Times, by the Washington Post, in which we are talked down to by a news organization of 147 years' experience, which has done us the service of explaining why the Washington Post cannot publish nor even identify internal documents and computer traffic stolen from a presidential campaign. I mean, why the Washington Post cannot publish any of that this time. Especially a lengthy J.D. Vance vetting document prepared by or for the Trump campaign. Which news organization has explained this to us about the Washington Post? Why, it's the Washington Post. Quote, this episode probably reflects that news organizations aren't going to snap at any hack that comes in and is marked as exclusive or inside dope and publish it for the sake of publishing, said Matt Murray, executive editor of the Post. Instead, quote, all of the news organizations in this case took a deep breath and paused and thought about who was likely to be leaking the documents, what the motives of the hacker might have been, and whether this was truly newsworthy or not. Well, that's the part of the executive editor's statement intended for the journalism schools as classes begin anew in the coming weeks. Here's the real part of what Mr. Murray had to say. The decision for newsrooms to not publish the Vance materials, a compilation of publicly available records and statements, including Vance's past criticisms of Trump, appeared to be more straightforward because they also didn't reach a high level of public interest. Quoting this guy Murray, the one who still uses phrases like inside dope, quoting Mr. Murray, in the end, it didn't seem fresh or new enough. So if it were new J.D. Vance stuff, then they'd swallow hard and just push those morals and ethics to the side a little bit and run it. And not say all that stuff about taking a deep breath and pausing and thinking about who the leaker might be or what their motives might be. Gotcha. End number one justifies the means, and end number two does not justify the means. Frauds. From the same Washington Post piece, quoting Kelly McBride, NPR's public editor and chair of the Craig Newmark Center for Ethics and Leadership at the Poynter Institute. And before 2016, the general thinking was that even with hacked materials, quote, if there's something interesting in there, then of course you're going to report it, unquote. But with foreign state actors increasingly getting involved, it just feels dicier for news organizations to make the decision because you don't want to be helping another country undermine our democracy, McBride said. The motivations don't have to be pure, but it can't be to undermine the stability of the entire country, she added. That just seems like a bridge too far. Of course, that wasn't a bridge too far in 2016, was it, Ms. McBride? While there was no initial clear link between, say, Russia and WikiLeaks and Roger Stone and his wig, it became apparent pretty damned fast that there was a link between at least two of those folks, especially after that subtle hint from Trump. Remember when he said, quote, Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press, which he said, incidentally, in answer to a question by Katie Tur. God. And the same day that he said that, Russian intelligence began to target Hillary Clinton's emails. It's almost as if they were listening. The Washington Post, of course, is threading not one but two needles here. It is insisting it does not have to publish the results of the anti-Trump hacking, while insisting it was justified in publishing the results of the pro-Trump hacking, while also insisting it's older and wiser and more careful now. Bullshit. Brian Beutler flagged this clip from the old Showtime political program, The Circus. And since Showtime posted the clip on YouTube, I'm sure it won't mind the plug. I think the show isn't on anymore, but so what? It's a plug for Showtime, now available on your cable package. It's Mark McKinnon talking in 2016 with Washington Post reporters Roz Helderman and Matea Gold. Matea Gold, who I dealt with several times when she was in L.A., is now one of the Post's managing editors, and it's her voice you will hear first on this, and you should look for this clip on YouTube, because you should see Matea Gold's face light up when the other reporter, Roz Helderman, the one with the glasses, says she's just found something juicy inside the stolen materials the Post is going to publish, as opposed to these stolen materials, which they're not going to publish.
Obviously, WikiLeaks seems to have some sort of agenda in putting this material out. But at the same time, I don't think anything that's been released so far has been this big October surprise. It's going to change the trajectory of the race. Hey, Roz, you found anything?
A couple little things.
Podesta says that they've taken on a lot of water. And he says most of that has to do with terrible decisions made pre-campaign, but a lot has to do with her instincts.
Whoa.
And then Nira writes back, almost no one knows better than me that her instincts can be terrible.
Wow.
Did that create any issues for you guys as reporters that it seemed strategically leaked?
Yeah. I think every indication is that both of these hacks are stolen material. On the other hand, they're undeniably newsworthy.
This information's now out there and it's getting consumed by the public. So I actually feel like we have a responsibility to use it to sort of illuminate the stories that we're already been working on and pursuing. I think we have to assume that these kind of hacks will likely happen again and that this kind of material will be out there.
Part of the culture going forward.
That's sort of the psychological warfare aspect of this that the campaign argues, which is true. I mean, there's no doubt it has rattled them. Is everyone going to have to be on guard for this kind of hack in the future?
So they knew in 2016 this would happen again, and they knew they were setting the precedent, and they knew they wouldn't do better next time, and now they're pretending that it hasn't happened again. And they're pretending no precedent was set, and they're confirming they aren't doing better next time, and they haven't learned a damn thing. The Washington Post executive editor Matt Murray, again, in an interview with his own reporters about why his own newsroom is failing all its own ethical obligations to its own nation. Quote, Murray said the Post has no blanket, no hacked materials policy. You have to evaluate the material as it comes in. I certainly don't want to encourage hacked material, but it's going to happen in this world that we're in. So they've learned something? The hell they have. They published in 2016 because the material was hot. They're not publishing in 2024 because the material isn't hot. And when the next hot material comes in, they've made sure they can all sell out their ethics yet again in yet a different direction. One thing you may have noticed in none of Mr. Murray's remarks, nor any of the similar ones from similar editors at the Times or Politico explaining their cowardice, in none of them do any of them take the weaker but still far more commendable route of at least admitting they screwed up in 2016 when they decided to publish. I mean, it would be nice to see the word wrong come out of somebody's mouth. But in 26 years in the news and political news businesses, I can tell you without fear of contradiction that the most widespread skill in the field is the one that allows someone to make up gallant-sounding rationalizations for doing or not doing anything purely for the public interest, never for your own interest, and always accepting the responsibility, but never the blame. Because as the political impressionist David Fry once said, those who are to blame lose their jobs. Those who are responsible do not. You would think there'd be some pain from twisting their spine so much, so often. But remember, this is the Washington Post. These guys don't have a spine. A couple of other notes. You heard that Celine Dion is suing over Trump using her song My Heart Will Go On from Titanic at his rallies. I mean, come on, it's perfect. All right, I can understand her not wanting to be associated with it, but it is the perfect song. Everything but the glub glub. As another option, may I suggest the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald? This is hilarious. This is from Stephen Chung, a Trump spokesman who, to his credit, usually puts his name on press statements from the Trump campaign, even though Trump has been leaking anonymously on and off the record since at least the 1980s. The Harris campaign referred to the Trump-Musk Twitter, whatever that was, and referred to Trump's extremism and dangerous Project 2025 agenda. And the Harris campaign insulted Musk by saying Trump is there in service of people like Elon Musk and himself, self-obsessed rich guys who will sell out the middle class and who cannot run a live stream in the year 2024. Stephen Chung's response: all these statements, yet nobody ever puts their name on them. Effing cowards. Steve big mad. Steve's so big mad, he didn't notice that right under that statement it reads, Harris Walls, in capital letters. That would be two somebodies who put both their names on it. They were right, of course, though I did think there was one undersold gem in that thing that Donnie and Elani did on Twitter.
The next time what we'll do is if something happens with this election, which would be a horror show, we'll meet the next time in Venezuela because it'll be a far safer place to meet than our country, okay? So we'll go, you and I will go and we'll have a meeting and dinner in Venezuela because that's what's happening.
So they're going to move to Venezuela, huh? Don't let the wall door hit you in the ass on the way out, Donald. But finally, maybe the fullest measure of how bad it's gone for Trump and how fast it's gone bad is criticism from one person, one voter out there, one lone voice. Trump is getting hurt, says this one lone critic, because, quote, it's all about discipline. He's a very emotional guy, and if he's having a bad day, that bad day is going to come out during a rally or an interview. But he isn't like a guy who is internalizing what he should do. He just flies. And he doesn't really think about the repercussions of what he says, and that's hurting him. The speaker? Bill O'Reilly. Or what's left of him on Newsmax. I was shocked. Bill O'Reilly's gaunt now. Scary looking. Basically, he's down to just a skull and an ego. But understand what Bill O'Reilly's criticism of Trump means. More than a decade ago, when I still paid for front row seats at Yankee Stadium, mostly so I could give away 250 tickets a year to Make-A-Wish and sit there and get in ESPN's camera shot when they did the games, half the games I actually went to, there would be Trump seated a row or two behind me with a guest. Neither of them ever saying a word. Trump not even talking to this guy who appeared to have been his only friend in the world, the only person who ever showed up with him to these games. You'd see them drinking milkshakes occasionally, chain drinking milkshakes. Otherwise, they just sat there silently staring at the ball game. The other guy with Trump was Bill O'Reilly. If Bill O'Reilly is slamming Trump, it's over. Texas is in play. Florida is in play. Bill O'Reilly is in play. Oh, by the way, their tickets, their Yankee tickets, they were gratis, no charge, provided by the Yankees, because Bill O'Reilly and Donald Trump were two of the three biggest freeloaders I have ever seen at any ballpark anywhere. The third, Rudy Giuliani. Those were all free tickets. Me, I paid. I mean, there was a tax deduction for the tickets I gave away. I'm not going to deny that, but I paid because you pay for things. Christ. Also of interest here, speaking of New York sports, my past is slipping away. Yesterday, it happened again. The day before had been New York's top all-news radio station, the great inspiration of my youth, going off the air. And yesterday it was my first boss, the first of the long-suffering parade of my long-suffering bosses, retiring after about half a century of doing play-by-play of the New York Rangers hockey team. I have known my friend Sam Rosen so long that when I first met him, I wrote about it in a paper for one of my classes in school. Oh, sorry, Sam. That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann, my crazy friend.
Still ahead of us on this edition of Countdown. Monday, it was the New York all-news radio station, WCBS, going off the air. The station whose news director in 1979 gave me the self-confidence to actually pursue this as a life's work. Yesterday, it was the retirement, effective after the upcoming season, of Sam Rosen, the Hall of Fame play-by-play man of the New York Rangers. Sam was my first boss in radio in 1979. In fact, I met him 16 days before I got that letter from the news director at WCBS Radio. Sam was both my first true job lead and my first boss. And now he's retiring. As they say, time is undefeated. But there's more to this. Because after I met him, but before he hired me, and think about having a Hall of Fame career as a broadcaster after you were responsible for managing this crazy 20 and 21-year-old kid version of me. After I met him, but before he hired me, I had to go back to my senior year at Cornell and write a creative writing essay about a memorable person I had met under unusual circumstances, so I wrote it about Sam Rosen. And of course, I still have the original copy, which I will read to you next in Things I Promise Not to Tell. First, there's still more new idiots to talk about, the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. The Bronze, worse, Chris Cillizza, 2 Z's, and an endless amount of L's. You remember him from such worst person in the world appearances as It's Shapiro, people, and How Dare You Claim Trump Has Dementia? You're not doctors, even though I wrote 50 pieces just in 2015 diagnosing Hillary Clinton as untrustworthy and telling the former history teacher Jim Clyburn that Rule 1 is don't compare anything to Nazi Germany. Well, Chris, with a lot of Z's and an endless amount of L's, is back. It's been 23 days since Joe Biden ended his candidacy. It's been 7 days since Kamala Harris was formally named the Democratic presidential nominee. She has yet to sit for an interview with any media outlet, and she has answered less than 5 total questions from the press. Chris, those 5 questions were when she came over to the traveling pool and said, okay, what you got? And they asked her policies? No, they asked her about Trump and what Trump had said. And what did she think of Trump? And Trump did this and Trump did that. Who wasted the opportunity with the Vice President of the United States to address, I don't know, the border, the Middle East, Tim Walz, whether or not she was black or Indian or Blindian or anything like that? No, they asked her about Trump. Might as well have asked her about her football picks for the first weekend of the NFL season. So you're blaming her because our American news media, particularly the White House and the Vice Presidential Press Corps, is largely made up of people who only remember the last 3 hours of their lives. I mean, what do you want from her? You want her to have a news conference like the one Trump had last week, where it turned out his news conference was about him pretending to have a news conference instead of just saying, I'm going to come here and give a series of small speeches that have nothing to do with the questions you just asked me? She is, as Cillizza accurately notes, I just said it, Cillizza and accurate in the same sentence. Cillizza notes she was on day 23 of her campaign, official or unofficial. Day 23 of her campaign, and he's upset that he has not gotten an exclusive with her. You're going to try to push her off the ticket too, because she hasn't done enough interviews with the Washington Post, CNN, and anybody else that fired you? Jesus. Never stops. Absolutely no self-awareness whatsoever. You would think getting fired might have been the first clue that, oh, well, maybe I'm not doing this correctly. I mean, I have quit jobs and wondered, tell you, let me quit. Maybe I'm not as good at this as I thought I was. Never such a doubt has hit Chris Cillizza, has it? The runners-up, worser, speaking of not having a doubt, the Trump War Room, which is considered an official part of the social media campaign of, what's his name, Psycho Trump. They put out a tweet X, a Musco, or whatever you're going to call them, at 11:21 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time yesterday. There is a picture on the left of some 2-story homes. I mean, they look okay. They have porches that are not sagging, so they don't look like the more disreputable parts of upstate New York. They don't look like a place that you would live your entire life in going, I wonder where all the people who live in the United States actually go on a day like this. I haven't seen anybody new since the year 2003. They have that, and it's nice and clean, and the bushes out front are all right, and there don't seem to be any cracks in the pavement or in the 6 steps up to the giant American flag that's taller than any of the inbred people inside this house, that is clearly in a white neighborhood. And I might add, there are no people shown in this photograph. And it says, your neighborhood under Trump. And there's a picture of houses and a flag and no people. Next to it is your neighborhood under Kamala. And in it is a bunch of folks who appear to be rushing for aid after a crisis of some sort, possibly a hurricane, in perhaps an inner city setting. Most of them, if not all of them, appear to be African American or perhaps people of color shown in some other nation. It's hard to tell from the photograph. There's a guy in front with a very bad haircut who is drinking very, very earnestly from a cup of water. This looks like a water distribution scene after some sort of crisis. And it's packed. Everybody is there, and they're all in a small space, and people are worried. And in the back is some guy wearing a mask. It might be a crisis in Haiti. It's hard to tell. But the text above this from the Trump War Room is, import the third world, become the third world. Your neighborhood under Trump, your neighborhood under Kamala. So if you had any questions where the Trump campaign would be going henceforth, the answer is it would be going to George Wallace's gravestone to get his support for their campaign. Full-on racism. Haven't we done enough for these people and other past Republican slogans dating to 1966 and earlier? That is where they're going to go down the last 80-plus days of this campaign. If you think the stuff about Kamala Harris identifying as being of India descent and now suddenly becoming black, if you think that's racist, you ain't seen nothing yet. But I would remind you that in this side-by-side, these Trump shits don't even recognize the fact that they've shown your neighborhood under Trump as being completely devoid of people because, of course, they were some of the 1 million who died under Trump's mismanagement of COVID. That's just my interpretation of what that picture means. It's very clean here, like a graveyard. Nice flag, though, and seems to be at full staff, not at half staff for the 1 million people Trump killed. But the worst person, our winner, Elon Musk. You heard, I played a clip of it before, that very sibilant destruction of 2 hours of world history between Musk and Psycho Trump. The boast afterwards from X and its desperate attempt to appear relevant in the media space. Between 7:47 p.m., 47 minutes late, and 10:47 p.m., E.T., when Trump finally stopped effing talking already, President Donald Trump's space post, well, he's not president. He's ex-president. You can call him ex-president, former president, that's fine. I would just call him Psycho Trump, but that's just me. Trump's space post received 73 million views. During the same period, there were 4 million posts about Elon Musk and President Trump's conversation on X, generating a total of 998 million views. Somebody else wrote, CNN gets 50 million views per month, less than 2/3 of what this did on Tuesday night. I noted at the time that a Twitter view is a second. If you watch something on Twitter for 1 second, it counts as a view. And thus, the total number of seconds is the total number of views. It's not like TV. When you hear that 2 million people watched a show on Fox News, it means that at a given moment, 2 million people were actually watching the show, or estimated to be based on the way ratings work in television. It's not a cumulative. It doesn't mean there were 2 million different people who watched some part of it over the course of an hour. It's 2 million per average. We don't know. In fact, there is some demographic information about how many different people watched during the course of an hour. But the point is, 2 million is, okay, freeze time, count the number of people watching Sean Hannity, Rachel Maddow, when I did a show, me, and that number is 2 million. That is totally different from the idea of 2 million Twitter views, which is 2 million people watching for a second each. In other words, if, in fact, 73 million people viewed the Musk-Trump conversation, it's like, well, there's a drunk guy here at the bar, he won't stop his conversation with me. If 73 million people viewed for 1 second each, that would mean the total audience was actually 21,000 people. I mean, I don't think it was that bad, but that's just to give you the relative idea between a Twitter view and a TV viewer. Now, somebody who knows this far better than I do is Michael Mulvihill, the ratings and research and analytics dude at Fox Television and Fox Sports, and he wrote 73 million views and a concurrent viewership that never got above 1.5 million implies that the average viewer of this 3-hour interview watched for less than 4 minutes. We used to do pretty well on Countdown. We held people that used to watch for about 45 minutes out of the 60-minute show. The average length of time watching Musk and Trump was just 4 minutes, meaning at 4 minutes, people went, oh my God, I'm listening to this again. Let's go see what's on good old-fashioned TV, or I don't know, I'll just count my fingers. That'll be more interesting. Elon Musk, still lying, still stoned, still the cautionary tale about what happens if you mainline Ozempic. And today's worst person in the world. number one story on the countdown and my favorite topic, me and things I promised not to tell. It was James Thurber who once pointed out that the secret to great writing was never throw away anything you have written. He confessed that, I believe, in 1958, that he had managed to rework stuff that he had written in 1918. Well, I can finally top him. I wrote what you're going to hear next on March 27th, 1979. It was a creative writing assignment for my last English class at Cornell, and it was simple. Somebody you have met recently who you found interesting, or under interesting circumstances, 4 to 5 pages, typed double space. I'll spare you the suspense. It's about Sam Rosen. As you will hear, I had what seemed to be a courtesy interview with Sam Rosen in his office at UPI Audio in New York on Thursday, March 22nd, 1979. I didn't think anything had come of it, but on July 3rd, 1979, UPI Audio hired me, my first job. I was replacing their sports director, a fellow named Maury Trumbull, who was leaving to go be the sports director of NBC Radio. Yes, they used to have such jobs. Maury and I overlapped for about 10 days, so technically he was my first boss, but really Sam was my first boss, and he not only survived it, he's still working. He has been the play-by-play announcer of the New York Rangers since 1984, and he remains a friend. I guess I'm not that tough on my employers after all. Just as interesting, though, is a guy you will hear referred to in passing in the second sentence as an ABC sports executive. I will explain who that was and is after I read you the original. From the original copy, I might add, which I will start doing in 1 second from now. Keith Olbermann, English 135.13, March 27, 1979. By the time I cornered Sam Rosen in the back room of United Press International's offices in New York City, March 22nd had already qualified as a very bizarre day. In the preceding 12 hours, I had dragged myself out of bed despite half a night's sleep, conducted a successful job interview with an ABC sports executive who turned out to be a former WTKO Ithaca disc jockey, gotten drunk before noon at a bar run by an ex-Cornell basketball player, sobered myself up in the bowels of New York's subway system, and walked at least 3 miles on the hard city streets. Sam Rosen is a sportscaster for the United Press Audio Network, a low-grade national organization with which I had some contact and some small hope of employment. The Rosen who introduced himself to a burnt-out, tired me was a burly, slow-moving man, broad in the shoulders, straightforward and confident, and the owner of distractingly bushy sideburns. He had consented to spend a few minutes with me at the request of Roger Norham, a UPI newscaster whom I had met through a contact just 4 days earlier. Norham had thought Rosen might be able to help me in my efforts to get a job and, at the very least, critique a tape of one of my broadcasts. Page 2. Rosen began slowly and deliberately reviewing his rise to network radio from humble beginnings as a gopher at a New York station. It's a hard business, Keith, he pointed out, and you have to be prepared to start at the bottom, even, say, as an intern for a radio or TV station. I noted, rather meekly, that I spent the summer of 1978 in just such a capacity at Channel 5 in New York. Rosen seemed surprised and a little miffed at my sliver of experience and seemed to be groping for something else to suggest. Well, it's good to define just where you want your career to go and how it will go. Rosen's confidence disappeared a second later when I recounted my decision at the age of 8 to become the country's top sportscaster by starting in radio and then moving into television. He looked at me with mystification and slowly leaned back in his seat to the accompaniment of a groan from rusty hinges and the squeak of the chair's casters against the tile floor. Maybe you should try stringing, he offered, and began to explain the radio term for providing reports or newsmakers' comments to a station or network on a freelance basis. He stopped explaining when I noted I had done that for 3 city stations and 2 networks, including his own. Page 3. Oh! There followed a classic, deafening silence. Finally, Rosen seized on something he presumed I couldn't possibly have done already. Small market radio! he blurted, barking the words out as if he were desperately answering some oral test question at the last possible second. Sam looked hopefully at me, but I disappointed him by reviewing my 4 years at WVBR, the station's ratings and nature, and my 1,000 or so broadcasts on it. He was now getting upset. It was evident, and Sam later embarrassedly admitted that he was approaching our talk as a Major League Baseball player might a clinic with a dozen little leaguers. Well, you just can't expect a job in New York out of college, he was nearly pleading, and then more sternly, you have to be realistic. Well, Sam, I had decided to take the offensive at this point and was speaking softly and unpresumptuously. Do you think my 4 years in Ithaca will be discounted because I was a college student? It's small market radio, and I don't think it can get much better in small market radio. Can we listen to my tape now? Is that okay? Sure, my pleasure. Sam appeared relieved by not having to answer my question, and he quickly threaded the brown tape through one of the studio's many large tape recorders. Page 4. He hit the on button and sat back. My voice was soon reverberating in the small room. At first, Rosen simply gazed at the revolving reels and played with his sideburns. As the moments passed, however, the motion stopped and he sat up in his chair. Finally, with the tape over, he moved his lips as if to comment, but couldn't manage more than a nervous laugh. Then suddenly, his tone changed. You know, Keith, this tape... No, maybe I shouldn't point... Well, we just hired a guy to do sports starting next month, and I didn't have anything to do with the hiring or anything, but... Here, Rosen stopped staring past me and looked me instead squarely in the eyes. His tape wasn't half as good as yours. I'm very... Again, a brief silence and a staccato delivery. I'm very impressed. It was at once one of the most prideful and disheartening moments of my life. I couldn't help but smile at the thought that perhaps my basic skills were indeed honed enough to the point of excellence, but at the same time I sensed having been purposely placed in the right place at the wrong time. UPI Audio, as Sam later noted, hadn't had any changes in sports staff since 1974. And here there had been an opening filled just a week before, filled by somebody who sounded only half as good as me. Page 5. The rest of my conversation with Sam Rosen was far more enjoyable and relaxed. It had been graphically illustrated to me that patronizing condescension could be turned into genuine respect by my simply flashing a little talent. Sam spent the rest of my time in the studios bathing me in compliments, offering me any assistance he could, and urging me to make a lot of people listen to the tape. Make them listen to it, he suggested, drawing on our just-concluded experience, early in the conversation. The instructor in this class, English, what was it, 135.15? 13. Gave me a check mark with a plus on it. Sounds like a great experience. I can't believe that you'll have any difficulty in finding a suitable job. This is well written. It's clear to the point narrative. Some cleverness as usual, but cuteness firmly under control. Also, perhaps because written fast, none of those awkward spots caused by your fondness for being indirect. Some things have not changed at all since 1979. I wish I could remember the name of the teaching assistant who wrote that. She was very nice, extremely supportive, and obviously clairvoyant. Now, a little reminder that you cannot always, to paraphrase Shakespeare, look into the seeds of time and say which grain will grow and which will not. The ABC sports executive and former WTKO Ithaca, New York disc jockey I met earlier in the day, to whom I gave short shrift, to say the least, in sentence 2 of paragraph 1, was a vice president at a broadcast called Wide World of Sports, who gave me a brilliant piece of advice that I will save for a later edition of Things I Promised Not to Tell. And his name was Robert Bob Iger, I-G-E-R. By 1989, Iger was the head of entertainment at the ABC television network. In 1994, he became president of Cap Cities ABC, which owned ESPN. So he became my ultimate boss in my third year there. The next year, Disney bought ABC, mostly so it could get its hands on ESPN. Iger became president of Disney in 2000, chairman in 2005. He retired in 2021, but He returned to the job at Disney last year. And as I have said to him every time we have talked since March 22nd, 1979, when we met, and here I thought you were just some middle manager who still wanted to be a sportscaster when he grew up. Sammy. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Please share this podcast with somebody who does not listen. We're up to a total audience of over 1 million a week. Let's go. Let's go. No, thank you for listening. Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, musical directors of Countdown, arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Chanel on the orchestration and the keyboards. Mr. Ray in charge of guitars, bass, and drums, and playing them. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. My announcer today was my friend Tony Kornheiser, and everything else was pretty much my fault. So that's Countdown for this, the 84th day until the 2024 presidential election. Florida and Texas are in play. And the 1,315th day since convicted felon Dementia J. second-place Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the September 18th sentencing hearing. Use the mental health system. You've got this, President Biden. Use presidential immunity to stop him from doing it again while we still can. And anti-Semitic, anti-immigration, nut-job Republicans, please stop shooting at Trump. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Bulletins as the news requires. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.